The Arundell family of Cornwall are amongst the few Cornish families of Norman origin, and there are still fewer of French extraction who have for so long a period as at least 5 or 6 centuries been, like them, traceable in that county. Lanherne. The Arundells of Lanherne, the Great Arundells as they were styled, appear to have settled in Cornwall about the middle of the 13th century, at the place so called, now the site of a nunnery, situated on the western slope of a wooded valley, lying between St. Columb Major and the sea, or possibly before that time at a place in the adjoining parish of St. Irvan, named Trembleth. Journal of Royal Institution of Cornwall, September 1876, pp. 285–93. A very early member of the family, Roger was Marshal of England, and according to the Exeter Cathedral Martyrologium, William de Arundel, who died in 1246, was a canon of the cathedral. About the same time a Roger Arundel lived opposite St. Stephen's Church in that city. In 1260 a Sir Ralph Arundel was Sheriff of Cornwall, and a few years later we find a John Arundel holding lands at Efford, near Bude, and other Arundells were landowners in the eastern part of the county. Of the Sir John Arundel, the story of whose expedition against the Duke of Brittany in 1379 is recorded by the chroniclers. A separate and fuller account is given below. His grandson, Sir John Arundel K.B. the Magnificent, K.B. the Magnificent, was a great church benefactor, notably to the celebrated lost church of St. Piran in the Sands, Perronsabuli, and, according to his will, dated the 18th of April 1433, possessed no less than 52 complete suits of cloth of gold. He was a naval commander, and was Sheriff of Cornwall 4 times, and M.P. for the county in 1422–3. The Arundells intermarried with most of the old Cornish families, nearly all of them now extinct, thus adding considerably to their vast possessions, until at length, in the 29th year of Henry VI, John Arundel, born about 1421, had become the largest free tenant in Cornwall, his estates being of the value of 2,000 ell per annum. He was Sheriff and Admiral of Cornwall, and a general for Henry VI in his French wars, but was attainted in 1483. The Arundells acquired Lanherne by marriage with the heiress of that family, and they also formed, at different periods, alliances with the Carminos, the Grenvilles, the Bevilles, the Lambournes, the Carews, the Trevanians, the Erices, and other Cornish families. Another John Arundel was Bishop of Exeter, 1502–4, and of him too, as well as of another member of the Lanherne family, who became Bishop of Chichester in 1458. Fuller accounts will appear below. A grandson of the above-named admiral, also a Sir John Arundel, was made Knight Banneret on the field of Therouenne, died in 1545, and was buried in the Church of St. Mary Woolnoth, Lombard Street. He was the father of the erudite Mary Arundel, another Sir John Arundel, who died in 1589, or, according to the Isleworth Register, Oliver's Collections, in 1591, at Isleworth, was converted to Catholicism, as Dodd tells us in his church history, by Father Cornelius, a native of the neighbouring town of Bodmin. In defence of Cornelius, Sir John Arundel lost his own liberty, and was confined for 9 years in Ely Palace, Holborn. Cf. Morris's Troubles of Our Catholic Forefathers, 1875, Simpson's Edmund Campion, 1867, and Challoner's Memoirs of Missionary Priests, 1803. The next prominent members of the Lanherne family are Sir Thomas d. 1552, and Humphrey Arundel, 1513–1549–50. of both of whom accounts are given below. From Sir John Arundell, the knight banneret of their Rouen, descended the Arundells of Wardour Castle, and by the marriage of Mary Arundell, in 1739, to Henry, 7th Baron Arundell of Wardour. The Lanherne and Wardour branches of the family were, after a separation of more than 2 centuries, reunited. Trerice. The Arundells of Trerice were seated in the parish of Newlyn, about 5 miles south of Lanherne, and some fine portions remain of their mansion of the 16th century. At an early period they had another residence at Alliford in West Somerset, but they were seated at Trerice at least as early as the reign of Edward III. At first they bore different arms from the Lanherne Arundells, apparently owing to a difference of opinion as to which was the elder branch, but ultimately they adopted the same, viz. Sable, 6 swallows argent. However, this may be precisely to rip up the whole pedigree, as Richard Carew, the Cornish historian, who married into the Tolverne branch of the family, observes, were more tedious than behooveful. The earliest Trerice Arundel of note seems to have been a Sir John, Vice-Admiral of Cornwall early in the 15th century. When Sheriff of Cornwall he was sent by King Edward IV to retake St. Michael's Mount, which had been seized by the Earl of Oxford. Sir John had removed from Efford, by the seaside, to Trerice, an inland abode, owing, it is said, to a prophecy, Hal's, that he would be slain in the sands. Yet he did not avert his fate. For, on the strand near Marazion, he lost his life in 1471 in a skirmish, and his remains lie in the chapel of St. Michael's Mount. The Arundells of Trerice evidently continued in royal favour, for one of them received an autograph letter from the Queen of Henry VII, announcing to him the birth of a prince. Her son, Henry VIII, appointed another Sir John Arundell, grandnephew of him who was killed at the Mount, his esquire of the body. He was known as Jack of Tilbury. He is noticed below, as well as his grandson, John Game to the Toes, John for the King, and his great-grandson, Richard Arundell, 1st Baron Arundell of Trerice. Carew is full of information as to this branch of the family. The male line of the family became extinct by the death of the 4th Baron, John, in 1768, and Trerice ultimately passed into the hands of Sir Thomas Dyke Ackland, Bart, an uncle of the last Baron. The Hon. Richard Arundell, who died in 1759 without issue, was M.P. for Knaresborough, Clerk of the Pipe, Surveyor of Works, Master and Warden of the Mint, and a Commissioner of the Treasury. Amongst the legal representatives of the Arundells of Trerice in 1829 was Ada Byron, daughter of the poet Tolverne. The Arundells of Tolverne were seated at a very early date at the place on the left bank of the Val, which gives them their distinctive name, but no trace remains of their abode. They seem to have separated from the main stem of Lanherne at an earlier date than the Arundells of Trerice, and to have settled at Tolverne in the reign of Edward I, in consequence of Sir John Arundell of Trembleth, son of Sir Ralph Arundell of Lanherne, who was Sheriff of Cornwall in 1260, marrying Joan Le Soeur of Tolverne. Sir Thomas Arundell, who died in 1443, is another of the early Arundells who appears upon the scene. Like the Arundells of Lanherne and Trerice, the Arundells of Tolverne intermarried with good Cornish blood, but this branch chose generally the western families for their alliances, such as Rhyscymer, Trefusis, Saint, Auburn, Godolphin, and Trelawney. The grandson of Thomas Arundell, who died in 1552, who was also called Thomas, and who was knighted by James I, having seriously impaired his fortune by endeavoring to discover an imaginary island in America, called Old Brazil, sold Tolverne, and afterwards lived at Trudhall in the parish of Sithney. John Arundell, son of Sir Thomas, one of the Trudhall Arundells, was a colonel of horse for Charles II, and a deputy governor of Pendennis Castle. In 1665, under his relative Richard, Baron Arundell of Trerice, he died in 1671. Of the minor Arundells, the branch which settled at Mynardava, in the parish of Logan, appears to have been founded by one Robert Arundell, a natural son of Jack of Tilbury. Hals has, as usual, some odd gossip about him. One of his descendants, Francis Arundell of Trentgwainton near Penzance, was born about the year 1620, and died in 1697. He followed that unusual course amongst the Cornish gentry of taking up arms for the Parliament, holding the rank of captain. The Arundells sold Mynardava in 1755 to the Bassets of Tahiti. Another branch settled at Trevithick, about 2 miles west of St. Columb Major. Various others of the minor Arundells appear from time to time, but fallen from their high estate, in the church registers in the eastern part of Cornwall. One of the line, William, more than 2 centuries ago, married Dorothy, a descendant of that Theodoro Palaeologus who was buried at Landulph in 1637. She is described in the parish register as being extirpe imperatorum, so that there probably still flows in the veins of many a rustic in the neighbourhood of Callington and Saltash the mingled blood of those Arundells who came over to England with the Conqueror, and that of the Byzantine emperors of the East. Notable people. Attribution. This article incorporates text from a publication now in the public domain. Stephen, Leslie, ed. 1885. Arundell of Cornwall. Dictionary of National Biography. 2. London. Smith, Elder & Co.